February 16th, 2023, and I looked out the window this morning and the Arnold's Promise Witch Hazel is in full bloom. And that is crazy early. February 16th, 2023. And we have Crocus. Hey folks, how you doing? It is February 16th, 2023. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning right now, and it is literally high 50s. I'm gonna say it's probably low 60s out here. It's just been a crazy winter in a good way. It's been very warm. So this is Phantom, who likes to accompany me when I come out and feed the birds and then get some pets. The outdoor cats have become quite friendly. I just wanted to take a brief moment to show you folks this Arnold's Promise Witch Hazel. And I know, every time I talk about this tree, it's not the most showy tree in the world, but I just want us all to appreciate that it's, mid to late February. It's actually more mid than late. And I've got flowers out in the landscape. And this is why everybody should have an Arnold's Promise Witch Hazel and plant it somewhere in the yard where it can be viewed when it's in bloom at this time of the year, and then it can blend in the landscape the rest of the year. Over here is where I blew a lot of my leaves last year. I'd blow all the leaves out of the beds, hit them with the lawnmower, and then use the mower and the leaf blower to blow them back in the beds. But this is also where I've got a lot of daffodils coming up. So all winter I've been watching these mounds slowly push through the leaves. So what I need to do is come out and actually, brush the leaves off the daffodils. But I've actually got a little bit too much here, so I do need to come through and just get the manure fork and just kind of thin out the leaves here, and I can use them in other places in the yard. I'm really trying to change the way I do things around the yard, and I have too many gardens to use leaves in all my gardens, but if you have a small yard or a lot of ground covers, you might want to consider just using the leaves. So I've got the daffodils over there, and then I've got another spot over here where there's daffodils. And what happens is once the daffodils bloom, you end up getting a bunch of weeds around them, and I can't get in to get the weeds because there's all the flowers. So I'm hoping to just prevent that completely with these leaves. And again, I'll have to come through and clean all this out. And it's a good 4-inch pack of leaves in there. But what I want to do here is actually take some of these leaves, and I have hosta over here, but it gets fairly dry around the base of the plant, and then I'll get some grass in there. So what I want to do is basically go with the leaves up until like the maple tree and maybe in front of the chairs here, and just make all this leaves, and then let the hosta fill in the back there. And there's Snowball. She put a little bit of weight on too, nice to see. I did get a heater for my bird bath, and this is actually like a heater for like a water for animals, but I put it in there. It really works out well because all through the winter, like when we had that cold spell, it was actually like -6 or -9 2 or 3 weeks ago here. But when we had that cold spell, it actually kept the water unfrozen. What I've been trying to do is get out and pick up the sticks. We've had at least 2 windstorms over the winter, and I have like a little grabber, and I'll go out and like there's a stick over there. You can just pick up the sticks. I'll put a video below I made a while back about that. And then I did cut back all the perennials, but I would like to come out every once in a while and get some of these clusters of leaves. There's always more coming, but these little piles of leaves always make the landscape look dirty to me. And this is a Lenten rose, which is starting to come into bloom, but it looks like those cold days might have gotten to some of the flowers. And this is why some people will leave the foliage on their Lenten rose to insulate them from cold temperatures over the winter. Usually it doesn't get that cold, or it's a more gradual freeze. We went from like 50 down to -6 in like 2 days here. Over in this corner of the yard, I did put a bird feeder up here, or actually it's a suet feeder, and then I put a chair inside the house so the cats can sit in the chair and watch the birds. Yeah, I see a lot of chickadees. I see a lot of tufted titmice. It's nice to see the birds out there, and it gives the cats something to do too. The purple coneflower, you know, I decided to leave them, and the birds have been slowly working their way. Like these seed heads, there's no way these seed heads would fall apart by themselves yet. The catmint, you know, I left the seed heads on in case they wanted to eat those. But I love seeing the new growth growing beneath the old growth from the previous year. And I so want to grab a pair of pruners and cut back all the old growth. But I'm still going to leave this a little bit longer so the birds have seeds, if there's any seeds in there, and possibly some shelter too. This agastache, I cut back like halfway through the season before it bloomed. And normally it would be up like 5 feet high, and this is topping out at about 3.5 feet high. With some plants like the purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan, the agastache, you can just cut it back, you know, cut the flower heads off before they bloom, and that way they'll bloom a little bit later in the season, and they'll also be a little bit shorter. I was out yesterday and I raked up all the sticks in this bed. I cut back the iris. I'll show you those in a second. But this is actually my Biokovo Geranium, and you see how nice they're spreading, and you can see I think the green is the newer growth that's coming up. Eventually, this geranium is just going to fill in around the base of this dawn redwood, which is just so gorgeous. The diameter of this tree is easily 30, if not 36 inches, like a foot above the ground. And I planted this tree myself. If I had to guess, I'd say it was in 2004, 2005, and it was like a 6-foot tall balled and burlap tree. If you have a child and want to plant a tree for a child, plant it well away from the house, and by the time your child is 10 years old, they'll probably be able to start climbing on this tree, and by the time they're 15, 16, the tree's going to be this big. The state did come out and remove this tree over here, and I'm very happy to see it gone. It was very close to splitting and possibly falling in the road. I cut back all my iris in here, and I raked up all the leaves in them, and then I raked up the leaves in this bed. And what I want to do is get some of those leaves that I have in another part of the yard and bring them over and just put like 1 inch or 2 of that leaf mulch right where the iris are. They get a lot of fine grassy weeds around them, and I want to see if I can prevent that. I did have some Montauk daisies in this bed. There were 3 or 4 of them in a row behind the flag, and they were kind of getting a little bit out of control. But I think it's a little bit too shady here for Montauks. Next year, I'm just going to do all annuals in front of these boxwoods. So in the front here, you can see where I've taken care of the weeds. But behind these boxwood, I haven't weeded. So if it wasn't for me being vigilant over the winter, this is how all my beds would have looked, as opposed to how nice and clean they look now. What I've really been trying to do is keep up with the weeds and keep up with the maintenance in general. If I don't, forgive myself, not be angry at myself. Do as much as I can to kind of keep up with it, keeping the weeds under control, going over the edge of the beds regularly with the weed whacker, picking up the sticks, so that the regular maintenance is kind of always done. And the way I do that is I try to break it down into either smaller parts of the yard or just go out and do what I can do for a while, just so that it doesn't become this all-day slog or several-day slog. I never dug out my pansies at the end of last season, and I think they're still alive. I might not have to go out and buy pansies this year. Last year's might just start growing back. In this bed as well, I just want you to appreciate how few weeds there are. I came out several times to weed this bed in the winter, because usually there's this one little tiny weed that has like a bunch of foliage, and it only grows like a 1/2 inch tall. It's a bear to kill, so I've been trying to get it before it gets it gets out of hand. I just think it'd be really nice to start the season with the gardens already in shape. The other thing, you'll notice there's no mulch in my gardens. And I'm trying to see how things go using no mulch and just keeping up with the weeds. And what I would like to do at some point is, bring some compost in and just top dress the gardens with compost. I've got pretty good soil here already. If I had mulch in the gardens now, I'd probably have like a 2-inch thick layer of mulch kind of all matted together, and it would be kind of a pain to work in the gardens and to see what's what. This is another Lenten rose. This one's actually purple, and this one looks like that frost, that really cold spell got to it. I don't know if it was because I cut all the foliage off in the fall or just because it went down to -9 degrees. The roots are fine, but all the flowers that were starting to emerge, they are starting to or they have died back. So in this part of the yard, there's usually like random crocuses coming up. And I never planted crocuses here, but they got started and they just, every year they seem to fill in some more. So I don't see any crocuses yet. It looks like I spoke a little too soon, folks. I was standing in the yard over there, but if we come over here, the crocus have come up already. So again, this is February 16th, 2023. And we have crocus. So this is the other spot where I shredded all the leaves and then I just blew them all over here. So this is probably a couple yards worth of leaf mold or shredded leaves. And just look at how lovely this is. You could put this around any plant and it's not going to choke it out, even if it ends up resting against the plant. I don't think it's going to end up getting matted. So I'm looking forward to bringing the wheelbarrow over and scooping some of this up. We were just over there, and I do just want to show you over here. This spot of the yard is never really the thickest grass. I honestly probably went a little bit too heavy with the leaf mold. The good news is they're going to choke out crabgrass that tries to grow here, but try not to have that many leaves left on your lawn. Basically, anytime I do any work in the yard, if I have debris, unless it's a diseased plant or sticks, I put it here. And I don't put all my ash. I had just one bucket I put in. I try not to overdo the ash, but I did have one bucket of ash from the fireplace. And then we do put kitchen scraps over here as well. This is also a good food source. We have a bunny that lives somewhere nearby, and the possums love to come by here too. And then I did add a lot of bark, and I'll probably have to cull some of the sticks and the bark out of here. Eventually what I'll do is I'll just take a machine and move it all into one big pile. Wait a few years and then it'll turn into dirt, and it's just the most beautiful dirt. Sometimes when you buy compost, it's like too organic, whereas usually what I end up with here is, because I've got edgings and bark and all the other stuff, it never turns into this super dense, mucky mess. I think when last year started, I was probably around this maple tree, and all this has come just since last year. So I really need to get the dingo out and kind of push it all into a pile, and then from like the maple back, that should all be good. So I should kind of separate that out and make a pile of dirt I can use right away if I need some, and then this pile, just let it sit. If you have any patches where the grass went down to bare dirt, or your snowplow damage, or low spots in the yard, now is the perfect time to either put some soil in those spots, throw some seed down, and then just scratch them with a rake, or just put some seed down and scratch them with a rake. The key is you want that grass seed to be there as soon as the temperatures are warm enough for it to grow, so the grass seed grows as opposed to the weed seed. So that's pretty much where we are with the yard right now. I mean, I can't say I've done a ton over the winter, but I'm really happy. I've been keeping up with the sticks. I got all the leaves cleaned up in the fall. I went out of my way to make sure I blew as much of the leaves as I could out of the beds. and shredded them up, did something with them so that I'm not like having to mess with wet, matted, damp, nasty leaves in the spring. So the next thing I'd like to do for my yard is either just take a weed whacker. My edges aren't horrible. Either just take a weed whacker and run it around the edges of the beds, then take a flat shovel and just deepen just that last 3 to 6 inches just to give them some definition. Or if the edges aren't so good in the beds and they need to be deeper, run the edging tool the way I've showed in many other videos. I'll put one below, and then again, just take that flat shovel and scrape out the edges and make them nice and deep. What I really want to do is just kind of keep up with things, but not keep up with things in this like hurried, oh my God, I got to get this done manner. Just to know the weeds are coming. So when I see small weeds, get them right away. Get the leaves out of the beds as soon as I can, because I know as soon as the first few warm days come, everything's going to explode. My daffodils in the front, as soon as the first few warm days come, they're just going to take off. So I need to get out there and put the leaves around them right now, and the iris as well, so that that's just done. So it's not like the plant is halfway grown and I'm fighting it rather than working with it to mulch around it. Those are my thoughts on the garden so far. I mean, usually in mid-February, I'd be making snowblowing videos. I haven't had to use my snowblower once yet this year, which should be somewhat shocking, but I really feel like come early April, we're gonna get 1 or 2 really bad storms or maybe a cold snap. Based on life experience, that's the way I feel, but I could be wrong. So anyways, folks, happy Valentine's Day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.